The humble studio of Earth Touch. In the heart of the sprawling alien metropolis of Nyara, where towering crystalline spires reached for the lavender skies, there was a place where the pulse of creativity beat strong. A small, unassuming pottery studio known as Earth Touch Fine Clay Arts. Despite its modest appearance from the outside, nestled in the city's artistic quarter, the studio had earned a reputation across 3 star systems. It was a place where art was not merely made, but breathed into existence through the hands of one remarkable human artist, David Reed. Nyara, with its advanced technology and awe-inspiring architecture, was a city that dazzled the senses. Everywhere one looked, there were innovations that seemed to defy the very limits of imagination. But despite the galaxy's vast strides in digital perfection, where holograms and simulations had taken center stage, there was something about the tangible, the real, that had captivated David. Something primal, something that spoke directly to the soul. And that was why he had settled here, amidst the vibrancy of an alien world, to create pieces that transcended the technological advancements of the times. Inside David's studio, the warmth of afternoon sunlight streamed through wide, dust-mottled windows, casting soft golden hues over the room. The studio was filled with shelves upon shelves of finished works, vases, sculptures, and intricate clay pieces that told stories of distant places and distant people. The earthy scent of wet clay hung thick in the air, blending with the hum of distant voices from the streets outside. It was a haven, a refuge where David could focus on the art of creation, his hands deftly shaping, molding, and perfecting his clay creations. David himself was a striking figure, his broad shoulders and muscular torso gleaming with a thin layer of sweat as he worked. Shirtless, with his brown hair tousled from hours of focused effort, he moved with practiced precision, his strong hands gently coaxing the clay into delicate, graceful forms on his pottery wheel. His movements were rhythmic, fluid, as if each motion of his hands was an extension of his thoughts. Deliberate, measured, and yet full of passion. The pieces that he shaped weren't just objects. They were expressions of life, captured in the rawness of Earth itself. His reputation had spread across multiple star systems, from the bustling trade worlds of the Galactic Federation to the more rugged planets on the galaxy's outer rim. David had become known not just for his technical skill, but for his ability to capture the essence of his subjects, whether human or alien, in every curve, every detail of his work. His pottery wasn't just a mere reflection of the physical world. It was a bridge between worlds, a testament to the human spirit and its ability to create something meaningful even in a galaxy teeming with digital perfection. The soft chime of the studio's door broke his concentration, a sound that, despite its simplicity, always seemed to bring with it a new possibility. David glanced up, wiping his hands on his apron, his attention shifting to the doorway. A figure stood in the entrance, her silhouette framed by the soft light filtering through the window behind her. David's breath caught in his chest as his eyes locked onto her form. She was tall, willowy, with skin the color of fresh spring leaves, vibrant and alive, almost glowing with an otherworldly radiance. Her chestnut hair cascaded in soft waves down her back, partially tied into a casual ponytail. The dress she wore was simple, brown, form-fitting, and left little to the imagination. It clung to her curves as if it were a part of her skin, flowing gently with her every movement. There was something undeniably captivating about her presence, a grace that seemed to fill the room. David stood, wiping his hands on his apron again, his gaze briefly flicking to his work before turning back to the visitor. He smiled warmly, though he couldn't help but feel a flutter in his chest, an unease mixed with curiosity. "Welcome to Earth Touch," he said, his voice steady but tinged with surprise. "I'm David Reed." The woman stepped forward, her golden eyes glinting in the soft light as she surveyed the studio with a quiet appreciation. She didn't immediately answer him, but when she did, her voice was like a melody, soft, and yet filled with a commanding presence. "I know exactly who you are," she said, her gaze holding his. unwavering. "I'm Tyla Ner. Your work is legendary, even on my home world of Verdant Prime." David felt a rush of pride and surprise at the mention of Verdant Prime. It was a planet known for its lush, verdant landscapes and its deeply rooted culture in art and beauty. The thought that his work had made its way to such a faraway place, to an alien world, filled him with a quiet sense of accomplishment. "You're too kind," David said, though he couldn't quite hide the slight blush creeping up his neck. "What brings you to my humble studio?" Tyla moved closer, her feet silent on the wooden floor as she approached him. David couldn't help but watch her, his eyes drawn to her every movement. There was a fluidity in the way she walked, a gracefulness that was almost hypnotic. As she drew closer, she stopped just a few feet away, her golden eyes now studying him intently, almost as if she were sizing him up. "I have a commission for you," Tyla said, her voice soft, but carrying an undercurrent of something deeper, something serious, one that requires your particular talents. David tilted his head slightly, intrigued. "A commission? Of course, I'd be happy to discuss it with you. What kind of work are you looking for?" Tyla's lips curved into a faint smile as she stepped even closer, her voice lowering just a fraction. "I want you to create a sculpture of me, in exacting detail." David blinked, caught off guard by her request. He had done many portraits and sculptures over the years, of various species of different cultures, but something about the way she said it, the certainty in her tone, made his pulse quicken. "I've done many portrait sculptures," he began, trying to gather his thoughts, "but usually they're of faces, busts, something." "No," Tyla interrupted, cutting him off with a gentle but firm shake of her head. "Not just my face, Mr. Reed." Her golden eyes glimmered as she took another step forward. "I want you to capture all of me. Every curve, every line." David's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced as the implication of her words settled over him like a heavy weight. "You mean," he began, his voice faltering slightly. "You want me to?" "Yes," she said, her voice calm and assured. "I want you to create a sculpture of me in the most intimate detail. I want to pose nude for you." The bold request and the artist's dilemma. The studio fell into a heavy silence as the weight of Tyla's words hung in the air, hanging like a cloud between them. David's mind raced, his thoughts spinning in a whirlwind of hesitation, curiosity, and professionalism. He had worked with many clients over the years, some straightforward, some with eccentric tastes, but none had ever asked for something like this. To sculpt someone in such intimate detail was one thing, but to ask for the vulnerability of nudity, to expose the soul through clay, was something far more profound than David had ever anticipated. Tyla stood before him, her golden eyes unwavering, her expression calm and almost serene. She wasn't flustered by the tension in the air, and her stance didn't suggest any hint of hesitation. She was resolute, and that made David uneasy. It wasn't the request itself that troubled him. It was the implication, the quiet intensity in her gaze, the way she made him feel like this was not just another commission, but something far deeper, far more meaningful. David cleared his throat, his professional demeanor struggling to return. "Miss Ner, he started, his voice catching as he searched for the right words. "I understand the value of your request. But I need to be clear. This kind of work isn't just about capturing the surface. It's about something much deeper, something personal." Tyla tilted her head slightly, her gaze softening. "I understand, Mr. Reed," she said, her voice gentle but filled with an unmistakable conviction. "That's exactly why I've come to you. You understand the power of clay, of real, tangible art. In a galaxy full of digital perfection, you're one of the few who can capture something that speaks to the heart of a being. Something real." Her words struck David harder than he expected. He had never thought of his art in such grandiose terms. To him, pottery and sculpture were simply the way he connected with the world, the way he expressed what he couldn't put into words. His pieces weren't meant to speak to anyone beyond the form itself, to express deeper emotions or meanings. But in her words, he realized that perhaps, just maybe, they did. He ran a hand through his tousled hair, his fingers brushing the clay dust that had accumulated there. He was nervous, unsure how to proceed. "This isn't just about making a sculpture, Tyla," David said carefully. "It's about trust, vulnerability. A work like this will require more than just time. It'll require a connection, a deep one." Tyla smiled, her lips curling into a soft, knowing expression. "I've been studying your work for years, Mr. Reed. I know what you're capable of. I trust you." David's heart skipped a beat at her words, and for a moment, he found himself at a loss for words. It was rare for him to feel this kind of pressure, but something about Tyla, her presence, her confidence, was making everything seem far more complicated than it should be. He had always prided himself on his ability to maintain professional boundaries, to keep his emotions at bay when working on a piece, but there was something in Tyla's golden eyes, something hidden beneath her calm exterior, that unsettled him. Taking a deep breath, David stepped away from the wheel, the unfinished vase sitting idly in front of him as he turned his full attention to her. "I can't lie to you, Miss Ner. This is unexpected, to say the least. But I think I understand why you've come to me. You want something different, something real, and I respect that." He paused, allowing the silence to stretch between them before he continued. "But before we move forward, there are a few things we need to discuss. Boundaries, expectations, and the nature of the work. This isn't just a typical commission. It's something more intimate." Tyla's gaze didn't falter, and she nodded, as though she had been expecting this conversation. "I understand, and I'm prepared to meet any terms you set, Mr. Reed. I only ask that you approach this with an open mind. What I want isn't just a portrait, it's a legacy. A piece of art that will transcend the boundaries of my species, of our cultures. A moment in time captured not just physically, but spiritually." David stood there, processing her words, weighing the gravity of what she was asking. She wasn't just requesting a sculpture. She was asking him to create something that bridged two worlds. A piece that would capture her essence, her spirit, and in turn, capture the connection between their species. He had always seen art as a form of communication, but he had never considered it in these terms before. "This will be a challenging process," David said, his voice steady despite the confusion swirling in his mind. "You'll need to pose for multiple sessions, and it will take time to capture every detail to the level of accuracy you're asking for. We'll need to work closely together, and I'll need you to be completely open during this process. It won't be easy." "I have nothing but time, Mr. Reed," Tyla said, her voice soft yet filled with determination. "I've spent years preparing for this moment. I understand the commitment required, and I trust you to help bring this vision to life." David couldn't help but be impressed by her confidence, her unwavering belief in the importance of this project. He had always been an artist who worked alone, carving his creations in solitude. The thought of opening himself up to another person, to someone with such a different background, was daunting. But the challenge, the magnitude of what she was asking, stirred something deep inside him. "I'll need to draft a contract," David said after a long moment, his tone serious. "There will be professional boundaries in place, and both of us will need to be clear about expectations. I won't proceed unless I know you're committed to the process and understand the intimacy of the work." Tyla smiled again, her golden eyes gleaming with an almost mischievous spark. "Of course, Mr. Reed. I wouldn't expect anything less from an artist of your caliber." David walked to his desk, his mind racing as he began drafting the contract. The terms would need to be clear. There was no room for ambiguity in a project like this. As he typed, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just another commission. This was something far more significant, something that would change the trajectory of his career, of his life. As he finished drafting the document and turned to face her, he saw that Tyla had remained exactly where he had left her, watching him intently. She was a mystery, an enigma that seemed to both challenge and captivate him in ways he hadn't anticipated. And though he had agreed to the terms, David knew that he was stepping into uncharted territory, a place where art, trust, and vulnerability would collide. Tyla took the contract from him, reading over it quickly. When she finished, she looked up, her eyes reflecting the weight of what was to come. "Let's begin tomorrow," she said, her voice firm, as though there was no turning back now. "The sooner we begin, the sooner you can work your magic." David nodded, his heart pounding in his chest as he realized just how deep he was about to dive into this project. He had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain: this would be a journey unlike any he had ever undertaken before. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something extraordinary, something he could never have predicted. But as he watched Tyla leave the studio, her silhouette disappearing into the soft light of the alien city, David couldn't help but feel that the future was about to change. And that change, he realized, would begin with a single piece of clay. The first session. The morning sun rose over Nyara, casting a pale golden light across the city's crystalline spires. The hum of the metropolis seemed to vibrate through the ground, and the air shimmered with the energy of the alien technology that powered the city. For most people, the day began with routine tasks, meetings, and responsibilities. But for David Reed, today marked the beginning of something far more extraordinary. He had spent the entire night preparing for Tyla's first session, pacing the length of his studio, rearranging his tools, and reviewing the terms of the contract he had drafted. He couldn't shake the feeling that this project was unlike anything he had ever done before. The gravity of it was pressing down on him, making every movement feel more deliberate, more significant. He had faced many challenges in his career as an artist, but none of them had made him feel so exposed. This was not just a commission. This was a test of his very ability to create something that would transcend both his and Tyla's worlds. The door chimed again, and David's heart skipped a beat. He wiped his hands nervously on his apron, pushing aside any lingering doubt as he looked up. Tyla stood in the doorway, framed by the soft light of the morning. She was already dressed, her long chestnut hair falling freely down her back in waves. Her golden eyes locked onto his, and for a brief moment, there was nothing else in the room but the weight of their unspoken connection. "Good morning, Mr. Reed," she said, her voice calm and steady, but there was a subtle edge to it, an intensity that seemed to come from deep within her. She looked every bit the part of the client he had expected, but something in her gaze made it clear that this was not just business for her. This was personal. "Good morning, Miss Ner," David replied, trying to keep his voice steady. He motioned for her to come in. "I've prepared everything for today. Are you ready to begin?" Tyla nodded, stepping into the studio with a quiet grace that seemed to flow effortlessly through the room. She glanced around at the familiar surroundings, taking in the shelves filled with completed works, the quiet hum of the pottery wheel, and the soft light that filled every corner of the room. There was something about the space that felt like home to her, even though she had only just arrived. "I've been ready for this for a long time," Tyla said softly, her voice filled with something that David couldn't quite place. It wasn't just anticipation. It was a deeper yearning, a hunger for something more than what the galaxy had offered her. She had been traveling for years, studying artists and learning the ways of other cultures, but now, here, in this small studio, she felt she had found what she was truly seeking. David couldn't help but watch her, mesmerized by the way she moved. There was a quiet confidence in her every step, every gesture. It was as if she knew exactly what she wanted and how to get it. But underneath that confidence, David could see a vulnerability, one that, despite her stoic exterior, she could not hide. "Are you sure about this?" David asked carefully, his voice softer now. "I mean, this is a significant commitment. The process will take time, and it will be challenging." Tyla turned to face him, her golden eyes unwavering. "I've never been more certain about anything, Mr. Reed," she said, her voice steady. "This isn't just about art for me. It's about something deeper, a legacy, a connection. You're the one who can help me create it. David swallowed, feeling a pang of uncertainty, but he pushed it aside. He had always believed in the power of his craft, in its ability to create something real, something lasting. This, however, was different. This wasn't just about capturing a physical form. This was about capturing a soul. He nodded, pulling himself together. All right, let's begin. They moved to the center of the studio, where the space had been cleared for Tyla to pose. David had set up a small platform, and a soft cloth lay across it to ensure her comfort during the session. He gestured for her to take her place, his heart beating faster than he had anticipated. Tyla slowly and gracefully undressed, her movements fluid, almost deliberate. She didn't seem self-conscious, and David couldn't help but admire her confidence. He had been prepared for this moment, but seeing her like this, vulnerable yet poised, made him realize just how much trust she had placed in him. This wasn't just about capturing her body in clay, it was about capturing the essence of who she was. And in doing so, he would need to let go of his own boundaries, his own reservations. When she was ready, she stood before him, her posture elegant and commanding, yet with an underlying softness that David hadn't fully anticipated. There was an undeniable power in her, in the way she held herself, the way her presence filled the room. David stepped back, taking a long moment to study her. He wanted to ensure he captured every detail. The curves, the lines, the subtle iridescence of her skin that caught the light in the most mesmerizing way. He took a deep breath and picked up his tools, his hand steady as he began the process. The first few minutes were silent, save for the soft scrape of his tools against the clay. David's hands worked quickly, pulling and shaping the material, letting the clay speak to him as he moved. Tyla remained still, her eyes closed, allowing herself to sink into the process, as though she were already part of the clay itself. It was as if she were already one with the medium, her spirit already beginning to infuse the sculpture. David found himself becoming more and more immersed in the work. His hands moved with a confidence he hadn't expected, guided by instinct and a deep connection to the material. The more he worked, the more he realized how deeply Tyla's request had touched him. It was no longer just about art. It was about creating a bridge between two worlds, a bridge that would connect them in a way that neither of them had anticipated.